Hi folks, in this video, we're going to talk about the petty cash account. Now, unfortunately, the petty cash account gets wrongfully used very often as this sort of catch-all account to categorize every single expense made in cash in which you don't have a receipt for. And unfortunately, that's not how the petty cash account is supposed to be used, but it's used quite a bit. The proper usage of a petty cash account from a QuickBooks perspective is to create it as a bank account. You're going to create petty cash account as a bank account so you can use it to deposit all the customer payments in which your customers pay you in cash and to make expenditures that you make in cash that might have come from the cash received from those customers or from ATM withdrawals of money taking out of the bank. So let's go into QuickBooks and show you what's the proper usage of a petty cash account. So we got QuickBooks Online in the screen, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the chart of accounts. There's two ways to get to the chart of accounts. I can click on accounting on the left-hand side and then click on chart of accounts, or I can click on the gear menu on the top right of the screen, and then under your company, click on chart of accounts. By the way, if this left navigation bar looks different, that's because you might be on business view and you just have to switch to accountant view. I like to use accountant view because, well, I'm an accountant. So I'm going to go into the chart of accounts, and then we're going to create the petty cash account first, assuming you don't have one already. So I have my checking account already set up here, my regular bank checking account. I'm going to create a new account called petty cash. So I'm going to click up here on the upper right where it says new. Click on that, and I get a pop-up to create a new account. Account type is going to be a bank. Remember, on the US version of QuickBooks, you don't get the word cash as one of the account types. On non-US, it actually says cash or cash equivalents. I don't know why they do it differently. So I'm going to click on bank, and then notice that under detail type, I have my traditional checking, money market, trust account, savings. We have an account called cash on hand. I could call it cash on hand. That account name is correct as well. But since we're calling this video the petty cash video, we're just going to call it petty cash. So it's a bank account, not an expense account. Not an expense account, it is a bank account. So I created the account, and then I'm going to click on save and close, and there you go. There's $0 in there. So let's say, for example, I go to the ATM and I take $500 out from the ATM that I'm going to use to make different expenditures. The first thing to do is to record that ATM as a transfer. I'm transferring money from the bank account, the actual brick and mortar bank account, into my petty cash bank account so it can temporarily be there, and then I'm going to record my expenditures from there. So I'm going to go to the new button on the top left, and then where it says other, I'm going to go to transfer. I'm going to click on transfer, and then I'm going to go from my regular checking account from my business, and then I'm going to go to petty cash. Again, from my bank account to my petty cash, assuming I'm drawing the funds from the bank. So I'm going to put $500 in there, and then on the memo I can put cash to pay the workers, whatever it happens to be for. So I took the $500 out, and then I'm going to click down here in the bottom right where it says save and close, because I don't need to do a separate transaction. Click on save and close. That closes out the transaction. Now I get to see the $500 inside my petty cash account, which is the second account that's here. So there you go. So there's my $500, and that $500 came from the checking account. If I go to view register in my checking account, I should be able to see, I'm going to scroll down here, I should be able to see on February 7th, which is the date of that transaction, where I took out the $500 and it went into my petty cash account. So that should be really clear on what the money flow looked like. So the $500 are in there. So now what do I do with that money? I use it to pay a bunch of people, let's say. So I'm going to go into view register of the petty cash account, and then in here, I'm going to record every single expenditure that I make. So here where it says add check, which is basically add new transaction, I can click on the drop-down menu, and I can select either check or expense. I know check wouldn't make a lot of sense because you can't write a check from a petty cash account. So expense is probably the best one to use. So we're going to pick expense here, and let's say we're going to pay a person named Robert Garcia. So I'm going to create Robert Garcia as my payee, who is a vendor, and click on save. And let's say I'm gonna pay Robert $200. I'm gonna go here where it says payment. Let me zoom out a little bit so the screen looks a little bit closer to what yours would look like. So I'm gonna pay right here $200 to Robert. On the memo, I could put daily rate or whatever it happens to be. And under account, I'm gonna pick the category that makes the most sense. So do we have subcontractor or contractors? There we go. So contractor expense. So whatever category that happens to be, this is not a tutorial about the category of the expenditures inside the petty cash account. That's gonna depend on the specific thing that you're doing with the money. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on save and done. So now I have $300 left in my petty cash account. Let's say I'm gonna pay somebody else on the next day, on the 8th. So I'm gonna do the same thing. Make sure that I'm under expense, and then under payee, let's say I'm gonna pay Mary Smith, who is another vendor of ours, and I'm gonna pay her also her daily rate. And let's say that was $350. Actually, I don't have $350. Let's do $250, probably a better one to use. And then put contractors, and then click on save. So now I got $50 left. Let's say with the $50 that were left, I went to Pizza Hut and bought a pizza. So let's say on the same day, I go to payee and I type here Pizza Hut, go to add vendor, click on save, and let's say it was $43.78. I'm gonna put here meals and entertainment or whatever category that happens to be. And on the memo, I could put pizza for people working late, right? Whatever it happens to be. Click on save. So now I got $6.22 left in my petty cash account. Now those $6 shouldn't magically disappear. They should stay in an envelope, in a box, in a safe, in what's called the petty cash account. And they're gonna be there until they're being spent. So in theory, now you need to reconcile this account and you need to make sure that you have receipts or proof of all these payments that you made. So let's say for Pizza Hut, you have a receipt. I can click on the transaction, click on edit, and it'll open up the underlying transaction. I can come down here where it says attachments. I can scan a receipt, click and drag it from my computer, post it there. I have my receipt. It's not a requirement that you put the receipts, but for taxes and proving what you did with the money, you definitely should have some sort of proof that you paid that money. Some document signed, some invoice, some receipt, whatever it happens to be. So there's $6.22 in my petty cash account. Let's say that's there. Let's say in a different day, I write a check to cash. And it's the same thing as a cash withdrawal. So what would that look like? So I'm gonna go to new and go to write check. And I'm gonna write the check to cash. And this is very typical. Someone will just write a check to cash so they can go into the bank and take the money out or cash the check. So let's say this is check 301. And then under category, again, this would be petty cash. You shouldn't have to explain what the check is for. If it's petty cash, it's petty cash. And all the details about what you did with the petty cash will be inside the petty cash account. That's the value of having the petty cash account. So $300, click on save and close. And now I should have $306.22 in my petty cash account. So let's say that money is just sitting there waiting for me to make another expenditure. Now I don't have to go into the check register to enter those expenditures. I could actually click on the new button and enter the expenditure from here. So I can go to new expense, and let's say I use the cash to buy some stuff at Home Depot. So I go here to Home Depot, create my vendor. And hopefully, of course, I should have a receipt. And let's say this is going to be materials or something like that, or maybe supplies. So we have the supplies category. Yeah, perfect. Job supplies, and I spent $98.78. And I can put here hammer for job 1, whatever it happens to be. You can job cost the petty cash expenses and assign them to a customer. Same way you can assign a class or a location or a tag. It works just like any other expenditure inside QuickBooks. Save and close. And there we go. Now I have $207 in my petty cash account because I spent some money at Home Depot. Let's say now my customer pays me in cash. What happens with that money? So I'm going to go to new and I'm going to go to receive payment. So let's say my customer, let's say this customer here, Alex Carrillo, pays me, let's say $100. Let's just assume there's a $100 invoice there somewhere. I'm going to put here $100 and deposit to, key thing, I'm going to go to petty cash. Why? Because most of the times customers don't pay us, and then we take that money and stop what we're doing and run to the bank and deposit the money. That's not very common. We get the money, we store it somewhere, we keep doing what we got to do for the rest of the day, and then eventually we make it to the bank. And then when we make the bank, we might not deposit the entire amount the customer gave us. We might deposit more, we might deposit less. That difference is explained and reconciled through the petty cash account. That's why I'm going to receive my customer payment in cash inside my petty cash account. So on the payment method, I'm going to put here cash, although it doesn't matter what you put on the payment method, whether you put that correctly or incorrectly. It doesn't really matter. But what does matter is deposit to petty cash. Again, I'm not depositing this into my bank account, not just yet. I'm temporarily going to throw that in my petty cash account. So I'm going to click on Save and Close, continue the transaction, and then I'm going to go into petty cash, click on View Register, and then I'm going to now see all the money movement that's in here. So the transfers, the checks written to cash, deposit in my petty cash account, my customer payment coming into my petty cash account. So it's just very, very clear what's happening with that cash. That way, we're not throwing everything into a big black hole. So that's part one of how to manage a petty cash account. Part two, let's talk about what happens if I already have a spreadsheet, okay? So this happens quite a bit where people manage petty cash account in a spreadsheet, and then once it comes to putting the stuff back into QuickBooks, they feel there's a lot of work and they kind of ignore the QuickBooks part. So I'm going to show you a trick on how to use a spreadsheet that contains a whole bunch of petty cash transactions, and we're going to put them in QuickBooks so you can see exactly how you can categorize them in a much quicker way. So let's assume we have a spreadsheet like a Google Sheet or an Excel file in which we have control of these petty cash expenses. So I have a column for my dates, I have a column for, let's say, the payee, I have a column for the memo, I have a column for amount, and a column for running balance. Very typical way to have control of your petty cash expenses. So again, assuming that you are going to follow what we talked about earlier, which is having a petty cash bank account in QuickBooks in which you record every single transaction in QuickBooks as the money comes in and the money comes out. And you also happen to have a spreadsheet in which you're using to keep control of these things. I'm going to show you how to import this information into QuickBooks. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the File menu and then click on where it says Download as a CSV file. If you had Excel, all you have to do is save as a CSV file. So that's the trick. It needs to be a CSV file. Then I'm going to go back into QuickBooks, and then I'm going to click in Banking, go into Banking, click on that, and then inside Banking, and let me zoom in a little bit. We're going to click here where it says Upload Transactions. I'm going to click on Upload Transactions, and then it's going to ask me, do you want to connect a real bank account? Obviously, that's not the answer. And the second one is manually upload your transactions. That's the one. So I'm going to click here where it says drag and drop or select files. Click on that, and then I'm going to go find my CSV file that I saved in my computer somewhere from my Google Sheet or my Excel spreadsheet. Open that up and then click on Continue. Then all the transactions are going to be loaded, and it's going to ask you which is your QuickBooks bank account in which you want me to load these transactions in there. So I'm going to click on the drop-down menu, and I'm going to select Petty Cash. Then I'm going to click on Continue, and then it's going to ask me, okay, is the first row a header? Well, basically, it's asking, is the first row a header with titles? The answer is yes for this particular case. Then it says, are amounts in one column or two columns? So do you have like a debit and credit column, or do you have one column with positives and negatives? Mine happens to be a positive and negative single column, so I'm going to put one column. And then it says, what is your date formatting? Mine happens to be regular, standard, run-of-the-mill date formatting, so I'll pick that. And then it's going to ask me which are the columns that you want to map. So definitely want to map date. Definitely I want to map description. So I click on the drop-down menu. I'm going to click on payee in this particular case. Notice that I don't have a memo field. So all the information in my memo is going to be lost. I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick in which you can bring that information in there too if you need to. So we'll discuss that in a second. But I'm just going to show you by picking the payee field, and then I'm going to select here amount. And that's it. I can only pick 3 columns. Then I'm going to click on continue, And then it's going to ask me, which of these lines do you want to bring in? So the reality is I want to bring all of them, except for maybe this running balance line and whatever that last empty line that's in there. So I click on select all, and I don't have any checkbox on these lines with errors, so no problem. Then I'm going to click on continue, then click on yes. And then what's going to happen is these transactions are going to be brought into my banking. Now, one thing I do want to mention is when I did the clicked on banking initially, I had a different screen that asked me to do the upload or connect transactions. If your screen already looks like this, it didn't look like mine before, the way you get to that same screen is to click here where it says link transactions, click on the drop-down menu and click on upload from file. If you do that, it'll take you to the same screen that I had before when I clicked on upload manually. Anyway, there's all my transactions. Notice that all my descriptions are coming in to my description column. That's the stuff that came in from Excel. And then from here, I can start categorizing. Now, I wish I had those memos. They would be pretty useful. If I click on the gear menu here on the right-hand side, there's actually a way to click on where it says copy bank detail to memo. Unfortunately, the bank detail that we have is right now limited to only that payee name. Why? Because the way we mapped it to a single column, and we can't map it to 2 columns. So I'm going to go into QuickBooks. I'm going to undo what I just did. I'm going to select all of them here, and then I'm going to exclude them just because I'm not going to work with them. I'm going to do one little trick in Excel so I can bring the full information that's going to help me categorize things, especially because I already have them in Excel, right? So I'm going to go back into my spreadsheet, and what I'll do is I'm going to insert a new column here, and I'm going to call it payee plus memo. So all I'm doing is basically joining the 2 pieces of information. So I'm going to do equals, select the first cell, and then I'm going to do ampersand, again, the and sign, ampersand, and then I'll do quote, space, hyphen, space, quote, and then ampersand again. I know this is not a coding video. I'm sorry about that. It's an Excel formula. It's a spreadsheet formula. And what that allows me to do is to say, hey, grab information in this cell, insert a space and a hyphen, and then grab the information from the other cell. So then I'm going to click on the second cell, and basically that entire formula allows me to join them together. So I'm going to go ahead and click on enter. And now I'm going to hit checkbox for autofill, or if you're in Excel, typically you do that and then you just click and drag like that, right? So in Excel, Google Sheets is a little bit different. So once I have that, now I have both pieces of information that I need. So now this is going to be a lot more useful. Now let me do this again. Go to File, Download CSV file, or File, Save As a CSV if you're working with Excel. Go back into QuickBooks here. Click here where it says Link Account in the drop-down menu. Click on Upload from File. Click on that. Go and select the file again, the one that I should have in my computer somewhere. Click on Open, and we're going to go through the exact same motions. Select here my petty cash account. Click on Continue. Then yes, 1 column. That's all the same. Date format, same as before. Now description, right now I'm going to pick the new column called Payee plus Memo. So now I'm going to have more complete information in my import. Then I'm going to click on Continue. Then it's going to ask me, hey, are you sure? Which lines do you not want to bring? I'm going to bring all of them, and then click on Continue, and then click on Yes. And then same thing as before, we just did a little bit of a trick in Excel or Google Sheets before, so we can get a lot more information with the data coming in, that richer information. It just helps me do the categorization better. Okay, perfect. So I brought the transactions in there. Now let's talk about categorizing them. So just like we did in the check register before, we're gonna do them in banking. Now, first transaction was let's go back into the spreadsheet. It was a payment for $1,200 from Anna Rosenberg. So if I go back into my banking, notice that it matched it to invoice 1130. Now, if that's correct, if that payment was for 1130, then I'm going to click on match. If that's not correct, then I have to figure out what the correct invoice is, right? So if I have a different invoice in QuickBooks, I'm going to have to go create the invoice so it matches correctly, or go find the invoice in the matching screen. For now, even though mine says payment for invoice 111, Let's just imagine that that said payment for invoice 1130. Now, one really important thing here in the gear menu, you always want to pick on, or you always want to work on what's called the show bank details version of this, with this little checkbox, because you want the exact information that was imported from Excel or a CSV file to come in here. What you don't want to have sort of this cleaned up or truncated version of it. So that's why I am using that option. Okay, so let's assume that's correct. We're gonna match that. Then we have a miscellaneous sale for a client named Marco Polo for $90. Miscellaneous probably means it's not gonna match to any invoice. So I'm just gonna categorize this. So let me create here Marco Polo, or in the case of having, let's say, a lot of retail customers that you don't have their name, you can have just one generic customer called retail customer if you want to. That's possible too. Then I'm going to book this into sales. Notice that this miscellaneous service memo already comes in automatically. That's a beautiful thing. And then I'm going to click on add. And now we're rolling. So now I'm basically adding everything from my spreadsheet. Here's my Home Depot. It's being categorized to job supplies automatically because I must have done a different transaction to Home Depot before. Click on add. That's the beauty of using this technique, because QuickBooks starts learning from the behaviors and starts categorizing things based on what it thinks it is. For example, here's Chevron, gas for pickup. It understood this is gas and put it on their current truck. All I have to do is create the vendor Chevron. I like creating vendors. I don't like having empty vendors. And then I click on add. And again, we're rolling much faster. Let's see Robert Gonzalez. Let's see, is Robert in our vendor list? I have Robert Garcia. Let's assume that's the same person. So we'll pick that one, and then the memo comes in automatically. I don't have to retype it in there. Click on add. Transfer from Chase. We talked about this earlier. This is where I'm going to pick my checking account, which is where I'm getting the money from, and I'm recording this as a transfer. That is correct. QuickBooks actually did half the work for me. Let me click on add. Then we have Mary Smith. Do we have Mary Smith in here? Yes, we do. And contractors, memo comes in automatically. Beautiful. Click on add. Then Stephen Morris. Do we have Stephen Morris here? No, we don't. Let's create the vendor. So we'll create him as a vendor. Click on save. Memo comes in. Beautiful. Click on add. Pizza Hut. Notice that I've done Pizza Hut before. I've categorized it before. Memo comes in. Categorization happens magically. Awesome. All I have to do is click on add. Perfect. Then we have Hector Garcia. QuickBooks thinks this is contractor, maybe through the pattern, maybe making the assumption. This is wrong though, because Hector Garcia is an owner, right? So if he's an owner taking money for personal expenditures, this should go into an account like shareholder distribution, owner's draw, or in this case, I think I have one called owner's pay / personal expenses. As long as it's an equity account, that's what happens if the owners take money from the petty cash account to spend it on their own whatever thing they want, or maybe they're going to take the money, pocket it, take it home, take it as compensation, whatever happens to be. That's how you book it. You're going to book it into an equity account called owner's draw, shareholder distribution, partner's draw, whatever configuration you have in here. If I don't have Hector in my list, I should definitely create Hector, create him as a vendor. I know that an owner is maybe closer to an employee than a vendor, but I like creating everybody that's not an actual W-2 employee as a vendor. It's easier, trust me. Then we're going to go to add. And then the last one is deposited to Chase. Notice that there's a match found. That's because I probably recorded the underlying deposit. Let me click on that so I can show you. I'm going to click on deposit so we can see what this is matching it to. So it looks like I already had recorded a deposit of the $289 in the checking account, because maybe I reconciled the bank account earlier. And when I categorized it as petty cash. So because I used the right petty cash category to record the money coming from the petty cash into the bank account, this is me returning money to the bank, right? Sending money back into the bank account. That doesn't necessarily match what customers pay me. Customers pay me some other amount that had nothing to do with this, but I use that petty cash account to take care of all the payments. And then I'm going to click on match, and then that's it. Completely done. So all my transactions are in there. So if I go back into my chart of accounts one more time. Again, I can do it from the left navigation bar or clicking in the gear menu. Go back into chart of accounts, and I go into my petty cash account and click on view register. Notice everything is squared up. My balance is 0, which I think matches my petty cash account running balance. Let me see. Yep, right here. So in my spreadsheet, I also had 0. So it's a beautiful thing. I got my petty cash account completely ready to go. Now I can reconcile it to tell everybody that's touching QuickBooks officially that our petty cash account up to today is done. So I click on reconcile. I put, let's say, get started. Then I put ending balance 0. Let's say today's date is 3/11/2022. Click on start reconciling. Select all the transactions. I can select all of them because I've done the banking. I've done it manually. However way I've done it, if my petty cash account matches my spreadsheet or my reality, and this is exactly what I have in my petty cash account, and any excess money that you can find, you're gonna book it to owner's draw, because if the owners take the money, and that's typically how money disappears from the petty cash account, that's how you're gonna book it. Now, if you actually have money stolen, that's a different story. You might have to create a category for that, like a bad debt expense or somewhere where you're sort of controlling what's happening there. But typically, when money is missing in the petty cash account and it's the owners that have control of that, that balance is just gonna be to that owner's draw account. So I'm gonna go to finish now. There's no difference. My balances match my spreadsheet, my reality. Done. I'm done. I can go back into my balance sheet, for example. So if I go into reports and go into my balance sheet, I look at my balance sheet. I look at my balance sheet, and my petty cash account has a balance of 0. You would think that account is inconsequential. It is not. If I click on that 0, then I'm going to get a report of every single money's coming in and money's coming out into the petty cash account, and I have complete control over it. And that's how you manage a petty cash account. I'm going to put a link in the description to a different video I did where I talk about making expenditures or recording expenditures that were made from the owner's personal bank account or from the owner's personal credit card account, which is a similar concept, but that's going to be an entirely different example. So if you like this video, I definitely recommend you check out that other video. I'll put the link in the description. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one.